Happy Sunday morning and welcome back to the first and long college football show. Wake up, sleepyheads. We've got more college football to talk about. It's on to the next week. That's what we do here on the first and long college football show. We wake up, we shake off our beers or our Sprite or whatever you drank and hung out and ate all that good food last night. Shake it all off. It's time for another week. Let's get into game position and figure out how to, first of all, make some money on these games, and second of all, try to make some sense of what is going to go on in some of these games. Mason, how are you this morning? We were just on here a few hours ago, and we're right back into the grind, man.
Yeah. Finished up at like 2 a.m. this morning. If you didn't catch our reaction show to week 2, I'll invite you to go check that out. We had a crazy week, y'all. You know that. We already reacted to it. The only game we didn't react to, which we were kind of watching on air, was the Oregon and Boise State game. Of course, Oregon does go on to win that game, but we were on upset alert for most of that game too. So, really exciting week. We got to make sense of it somehow this week. We're gonna kind of make sense of week 2 a little bit in the big matchups here, but we've got 4 pretty big games to talk about. It's kind of a lackluster week when you look at the matchups, but so was week 2, right? So was week 2, and we ended up getting some pretty big upsets, and so maybe we're in store for that again in week 3. Who knows? We're going to break down the top 4 games today, and also break down our top 25 and our new playoff predictions. So really excited about that. Let's get into it, Mark. Where do you want to start? Top 25?
Sure, let's do the top 25 first. And this is a live show. Look, I accidentally deleted one of your banners that we're going to use later. My bad. I was trying to help, and I didn't help at all. I'm sorry about
just
that.
So you know, the numbers are kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
On depending on which sport book you look at. I mean, Alabama and Wisconsin, I saw it at 9.5 in one sports book, and it was 15.5 in another. I mean, it's pretty crazy, the discrepancies here.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's the one I deleted, by the way. So,
yep.
Sorry about that, man. Yeah, let's go through our top 25, guys. We had a lot of changing going on. Like we said, we did a reaction show. We like to call it the overreaction show last night. As the games were finishing up, we got off the air just in time to see the final couple of minutes of Oregon, Boise State. Oregon kicks a field goal as time expires to really, kind of preserve their one of their top spots. We're going to kind of get into Oregon here in a minute, so I guess I'll save it. But let's talk top 25, and we'll just kind of go through these and kind of give an explanation for some of these. The AP likes to throw out a top 25, and they're not going to give you an explanation. They're just going to vote on it and throw it out there, and then, it is what it is. We want to talk about it. So if you've got something to say about this, throw it in the comment section. We'd love to talk with you. Some of these are going to look a little funny, guys, because I'm going to tell you something. Really, like 15 through 25, I don't know who's beating who in these games. We're going to find it. We're going to find out with a lot of them as the year goes on. But I mean, some of these are just kind of just a mosh posh of teams that have won so far in 2024, and that's all we have to go on. We can't worry about 23. What we think the roster is going to be. I mean, we got to look at what these teams are showing us on the field at this point. And Boise State comes in at 25. Look, they lost last night by a field goal to Oregon. Boise State has got as good a chance as any small team in the country as far as, making the college football playoff. One team that's not in a Power 4 conference, that is a conference champion, is going to be able to make it into that college football playoff, and I think Boise State may end up being one of those. Syracuse, as these are one of those teams I talked about. I'm not super high on Syracuse or anything, but I mean they're winning, right? I mean they're winning, so we have to respect it. They beat Georgia Tech this past week. It seemed like Georgia Tech was due for a loss. I can't believe we didn't bet on that game, but I mean it's hard to bet on Syracuse at this point, and so many unknowns. Arizona survives after driving the struggle bus pretty much all night against something called NAU, right? Northern Arizona. 0 for 10 on third down in the first half was Arizona. We're going to talk more about Arizona in our breakdowns because they've got a big game this week against Kansas State. So stay tuned, and we'll talk a little bit more about that one. Just kind of our initial thoughts on it, at least. But Arizona's got what I think is a pretty good offense at times, but seems like it's really, really, really inconsistent. And they've actually dropped down a little bit in our rankings this week after their win, just because they didn't look good. And South Carolina is a team that I really would have never thought, guys, that I would have in a top 25 that I was associated with this year. But this is where we're at. South Carolina absolutely bludgeoned Tennessee yesterday, or excuse me, absolutely bludgeoned Kentucky. Let me just hit the rewind button on that. Tennessee fans are going to freak out. They absolutely killed Kentucky, man. I mean, Kentucky's offense had zero chance of getting really anything going in this football game. So I knew South Carolina's defense was a little spicy, but they might be like 3 Mile Island spicy on the defensive line, right? And that's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on, because we saw several games this weekend, Mason, where both you and I were saying, look how important that defensive line is. If you've got a defensive line, you can mask a lot of other deficiencies on defense for sure. And then LSU still trying to kind of figure these guys out a little bit. I think they're trying to figure themselves out after a devastating season-ending injury to one of their best running backs, John Emery, last week. Not something that we were able to talk about on the show or had the opportunity to talk about, but John Emery tears his other knee. He just tore the last one, last year, 2 years ago, whatever. Just really got back from that injury, and now he tears his left one. So really, really sad story there for John Emery. But going to be interesting to see how LSU, runs the football going forward. And they're going to need to be able to run the football this week coming up, as them and South Carolina, who are right next to each other in our rankings, are going to be playing. What do you think about this group?
Yeah, I mean, Boise State, spoiler alert, I've got them in the college football playoff after, really playing Oregon tough. I think that they could be that, at-large team out of the Power Four. They look good. I mean, they look good for 2 weeks in a row now. And I think that once they get into their conference play, they're going to steamroll some teams. And also, Liberty didn't look that great against New Mexico. So that's why you're seeing them in the top 25. Keep your eye on them. I think that it's very fair to put them in the college football playoff conversation at this point. Syracuse, Kyle Honda McCord comes through big. 4 touchdowns yesterday, 381 yards. Just looks like a really good quarterback. I mean, it's so surprising, I think. But when you look at what he was able to do against a Georgia Tech defense that's been pretty stingy so far this year, definitely improved. This isn't last year's Georgia Tech defense. I like what I saw out of the Syracuse quarterback there, and as a whole, I didn't watch this game through and through between Georgia Tech and Syracuse, but I feel like Syracuse has figured some things out, and Coach Fran Brown is as advertised. It seems like he coached pretty well in this game. I mean, a 1-score game, and I think that now we got to take Syracuse pretty seriously this year. Moving on to Arizona, look, I'm worried about them this week against Kansas State, and we'll get into that breakdown here in a minute. But for what they've been able to do so far, I think that we still feel really good in Tetaroa, McMillan, and Noah Fafita. That's kind of their offense, right? If I said last night, if McMillan's not getting 200 yards a game, I don't know that Arizona has much of an offense, which is pretty concerning. But for right now, I think that it's fair to keep them in the top 25. South Carolina, you mentioned it, the defense, and the defensive line in particular looks really good. We got a freshman in Dylan Stewart. The other end players playing really well as well. And that defensive line yesterday against Kentucky, they were so disruptive that it made the entire defense look really good. Right, you had some players coming up, on some safety blitzes and whatnot that made them look really good. And we'll see against LSU, who's ranked right ahead of them this week. We're going to break that game down a little bit later on, but LSU, kind of bounced back. Didn't look great against Nicholls State. This was a close game at halftime. We'll see. I think that's going to be a really interesting matchup. They have to travel to Columbia this week to face Carolina and those Fighting Gamecocks. I'm going to have to start calling them Scarolina right now because they could upset some teams moving forward with that defensive line that just looks so disruptive. Really fun to watch. I can't wait for that game and to break it down with you.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one for sure. All right, let's keep going. Oh, sorry. Let's keep going through our little list here. Iowa State at 20. I mean, we had to throw them in there. Iowa State is a team, guys, that returns just an absolute ton of production from last year, and their experience really kind of showed on the field yesterday as they were able to go down the field and win this game at the very end against Iowa. Rocco Beck did his thing. Hit a couple of plays on the edge of the field there, and they were able to kick that field goal, like I said, pretty much as time expired. So Iowa State is a team that is in it in the Big 12, and we've got to give them their due because the Big 12 is wide open, guys. I mean, we almost saw Oklahoma State go down yesterday to Arkansas, and Arkansas is not a team. While we do feel like they are improved, they're not a team that's in any kind of contention to do anything in the SEC this year. And Oklahoma State, I would consider to be certainly a contender in the Big 12. And that just kind of goes to show you, I feel like kind of where the Big 12 is at right now. It's hard to figure. It's hard to figure which one of these teams is going to be able to get hot at the right time. We talked about this on last night's show. I feel like the Big 12 is kind of turning into like a baseball division where it's like, all right, who can get a pitcher and a hitter hot, right here at the end and figure out a way to win the last few games. There's going to be some beating up on each other for sure. Oklahoma at 19. Some of the problems we talked about in the offseason kind of were rearing their ugly head yesterday against Houston. Houston's quarterback just absolutely torches the secondary, so that's kind of a question that is starting to arise about this Oklahoma roster at this point. We're just going to chalk it up right now to a bad week. We move Oklahoma down a little bit in our rankings, and we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But Houston is not a team that, has been known for doing a whole heck of a lot the last few years, really since Ed Oliver left years ago. Haven't really done a whole lot. Clemson at 18. I think Clemson is I think they're the second team to beat in the ACC right now. And that's kind of weird to say considering that Clemson started the season off getting thumped by Georgia. But I think Georgia is one of the few teams that we've seen this year that we can classify as excellent. And, Clemson's defense held in there as long as they could in that game. That's pretty much why they're here. That's pretty much why they're ranked where they're ranked. I think this defense is really pretty good for Clemson. I don't know that it's as deep as some of the best defenses in the country, but I think it's really good. Michigan, they're sliding. And if Michigan doesn't watch out, the cheese will just slide all the way off the cracker here. We talked about last night, talking about the Big Ten. USC might be the third best team in the Big Ten right now. I'm not so sure that Michigan can beat USC, and I forgive me, there's so many schedules in my head. I can't remember if they play or not. But regardless, USC looks like a better team than Michigan to me right now. And I'm just going to have to see more from Michigan to be able to kind of change my mind on that. But Michigan is trending down, and honestly, with everything they lost on offense, we probably should have had them farther down to begin with. Oklahoma State at 16. I think Oklahoma State's a good team. I think if Cam Rising is hurt, we talked about this last night as well. Cam Rising gets hurt yesterday in their game, goes out in the second quarter. Utah doesn't score another point in the football game. If Utah is Utah without Cam Rising, then give me Oklahoma State to win the Big 12 is kind of where I'm at right now. What do you think about this group, Mason?
Yeah, I mean, starting off with Oklahoma State, we keep talking about the experience of that unit. Kind of reminds me of TCU a few years ago, where they just had a ton of experience. But Oklahoma State beat a top 25 team, or at least a top 25, but based off of the first and long college football shows rankings. We did have Arkansas in our top 25 last week. Really liked what I saw out of Arkansas. I don't really know that them losing against Oklahoma State moved the needle in my impression of Arkansas moving forward. I thought that they played really well and just kind of lost the game more so than Oklahoma State won it. But I really like what I've seen out of the experience. I thought Alan Bowman put the team on his back at the end of the game, and Oklahoma State proved that they can win a game without Ollie Gordon. For most of that game, Ollie Gordon was held to very few yards in the running game. Did catch a pass late to get to really secure the win in double overtime, and caught a touchdown pass there. But I like what I've seen out of Oklahoma State. I'm with you, Mark. I think that Oklahoma State is now probably the second best team, second favorite to win the Big 12 at this point. I kind of slide them ahead of Kansas State based on the what we saw against Tulane for Kansas State this past week. Michigan, they got to slide down, right? I thought that Michigan's defense would have been able to sort of hold serve against Texas's offense. As good as Texas's offense is, I thought that Michigan's defense would be a little bit stronger, particularly in the run game, and it seemed like Texas just moved the ball at will, and they could run the ball at will in this game. They got beat up front, and they're down to 17 now because of it. Clemson, look, they handled business, scored 66 points against App State, which is no slouch. 66 points is a lot of points to score against anyone. And Clemson kind of proved that they do have a little bit of a pulse on offense. They've got to build on that moving forward, but they're definitely a team to watch in the ACC. Oklahoma at 19. Still really like the team as a whole. I think that they had a down week for the most part, and that kind of happens, especially with a new quarterback. That can happen, but I'm not going to go back and watch the Houston and Oklahoma game, right? I'm just not. I'm gonna chalk it up as an offensive sort of a bad game offensively, I guess, for Oklahoma, and we're gonna move forward. They got some games coming up. We'll get to see them tested here very soon. And then Iowa State, a big win in a rivalry game. We thought that Rocco Becht is who he appears to be. Really like what they've got at the quarterback position and a lot of experience overall on this team. Last year we were looking at Iowa State, and we saw them lose a ton, right, going into last season, and we had them kind of low on our list because of that. And now this year, all of those players are returning and have another year under their belt. Watch out for Iowa State. I think that they're going to – this won't be the last team that they upset, right, as we move forward.
Yeah.
I think that they should be in the top 25 based off of that performance against a tough Iowa defense. I think that the Iowa offense kind of showed their true colors this week. The 40 points they put up in week one was a little bit of a smoke and mirrors trick, I guess. But Iowa State, welcome to the top 25.
Yeah. Welcome. Let's see how long you last. There's been several teams kind of washed out really quickly after they appeared here. So we will see. Kansas State, we're going to talk more about them shortly, but breaking in a new quarterback in Avery Johnson, it was kind of a rough go at it, right? Against Tulane this past week, didn't cover the spread, and that kind of causes a little bit of concern. Gave up a lot of yards to Tulane. We'll kind of talk more about that one here in just a minute. Nebraska, they got to move up. After what I saw last night, a dominant victory. And yes, I said it right. The Nebraska Cornhuskers dominated someone, and it was the Colorado Buffs. And so it couldn't have been any sweeter. I know the parties in Nebraska probably just ended a few hours ago as we're recording this, because that stadium was absolutely electric. Nebraska definitely seems to have some momentum. How do they handle success is going to be a big question now. Not a team that has had a winning culture over the last few years, right? So how are they going to handle the success? That's just as important as how you would handle a loss. It's just in the other direction, and as Nick Saban would say, watch out for the rat poison for Nebraska. But for all intents and purposes, I like what I saw, man. The offensive line did exactly what they needed to do. I could have drove my truck through some of the holes they were opening up. Um, you know, uh, whether Colorado's good defensively or not, that's who they lined up against, and they beat their ass. And that's what you're looking for. Penn State at 13, I am not super confident in Penn State. I'm just going to be honest with you. After what I just saw with Bowling Green, you lose your defensive coordinator last year, Manny Diaz, and I was of the thought and belief that Penn State was going to have a really good defense no matter what. But they were slipping in the first half of this game against Bowling Green yesterday. Absolutely slipping. Found themselves in a tough position and ended up squeaking out a victory by a touchdown against Bowling Green last night. I'm just not crazy confident in Penn State at this point. Going to be, we'll just have to kind of keep an eye on them. They have to stay where they're ranked. I mean, I think they have a chance to be the second or third best team in the Big Ten, but I don't know if that potential is going to be realized or not. We'll have to just kind of keep an eye on them. I don't like the wide receiver room. Utah at 12. I feel great about Utah at 12 if Cam Rising is playing. If he's not, we'll find out more this week, hopefully, because Utah's got some big games coming up. So they're going to need Cam Rising to make his way back. They don't have a huge game this week that I feel like they're going to lose if he doesn't play necessarily, but when he's not out there, they don't score points. I mean, it is a dramatic difference. I think Cam Rising could possibly be an NFL quarterback, Mason, if he can figure out a way to stay healthy, because when he's out there, man, he is just in full charge of what's going on that field. Absolute field general. Louisville, Louisville, one of those three is correct. They're at number 11. We don't know yet. We don't know yet about this team. I have a good feeling. I feel like they're in pretty decent shape. A lot of the fans feel like the defense is in good shape. I trust Braum to have a good offense and figure out the offense as the year kind of goes on. They're in contention for the ACC. There's zero doubt about that. So with the ACC being as wide open as it is, Louisville, whatever it is, Clemson, those are kind of your next tier below Miami. That's how I see it right now. What do you think about this group?
Yeah, I mean, I think Louisville is a little bit of a projection. I don't know. I'm certain that the AP Top 25 will not have Louisville at number 11, but I think it's fair to project. I really like the defense. I really like Gelati or Gelat, however you say his name, on the defensive line. I think that he's one of the best in the country, and I'm anxious to see them in some competitive games. We'll see what they do in the ACC. I still think that Miami is a tier above everyone else in the ACC. That's a little bit of a projection too, because it's Miami and they haven't proven it. I get it, but we've been pretty accurate in projecting a lot of these teams. And speaking of projecting, Nebraska, I think we're still ahead of the curve. I know I'm jumping from 11 to 14 here, but we've had Nebraska in our top 25 since the preseason, and a lot of fans have commented and said, "Well, what has Nebraska done the past few years? They're hardly a bowl team." I get that, but we're projecting based on the research that we did. And the research that we did led us to believe that Nebraska would win and cover against Colorado, and they did. And now we're projecting them to really go 7-0 to start the season. I think they'll be 7-0 whenever they face Ohio State And if they're 7-0 at that point, they're going to be in the top 15. And I think that they should be. This is a really solid team. At number 12, we got Utah. I'm hearing that Cam Rising's going to be fine. It seems like it was a laceration on his finger, nothing too crazy, and it sounds like he's going to play next week. But who knows with Whittingham? I mean, who really knows what's going on? I'm sure that he'll be back at some point. So I think that it's fair to keep them at the top of the Big 12 in our rankings, assuming he comes back, which I really do feel like he will. This is to me the tier one, the sole tier one team in the Big 12. Utah playing well on both sides of the football as long as Cam Rising's in there. Penn State, just what happened to this defense? How are there that many holes in the defense when you're facing Bowling Green? I don't understand it. Got to get better. Usually, I mean, and even last year we saw Penn State just blow out these teams that weren't named Michigan and weren't named Ohio State. And they really kind of should have lost this game against Bowling Green in some ways. Made for really interesting TV, but I'm concerned about the Nittany Lions myself. Already talked about Nebraska. Kansas State, a little disappointed in how they've been playing here as of late. I think Avery Johnson is still kind of going through the young quarterback stage here. He is just a true sophomore. But, you know, if they can't get him up and going, I've got concerns about them in this offense. You know, but I do think that they're still in the Big 12 race. I think that there's a lot of untapped potential on the offensive side of the football, and I'm not going to project too much about what they're able to do until I see it.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Let's take it into the top 10 here. Here's where I start to get pretty confident, you guys, and not necessarily with USC at 10, but really 9 through 1, I feel very, very confident in this ranking at the moment, given all, you know, all of the results that we have to look at so far. USC slides into the number 10 spot. You know, this is a little bit kind of just by default, just by what other teams have done, has kind of thrown USC into this position. That we haven't been guys that have been crazy high on USC. USC always has a high ceiling, though, because they're always going to have high-end athletes. D'Anton Lynn is making a big difference for this defense. And it really, all he's done is just put these guys in position to make plays for USC. Make sure they're in position. That's what a big selling point of D'Anton Lynn was coming over from UCLA last year as a defensive coordinator. He had a great defense last year, and you think he had a bunch of amazing athletes at UCLA? No, he didn't have 5-star defensive players at UCLA. He had a good system, and he knew how to get guys in position to make plays. And that's exactly what USC has been lacking. So it's not too far stretched to me to think that if USC, and this is something we've talked about all offseason and early in the season, if USC can field a defense that is somewhat, you know, has some kind of wherewithal about them, watch out. Because the USC offense, while it may not be just amazing early in the season, I guarantee you by the end of the season, this offense is going to be really, really good, barring some kind of crazy injuries or whatever. So I'm going to trust Riley to figure out the offense, and it seems as though D'Anton Lynn has figured something out with the defense. Do they have the depth? No. But they've got a plan now, at least. They're not just a bunch of kids running around on the playground like they were last year. Alabama at 9. This is a team we've dropped down. We haven't seen Alabama play anybody, so it's really, really tough to, you know, really know what Alabama's about. But last night they struggled mightily with South Florida, and the final score did not indicate exactly what went on in that football game, but it was 16-14 Alabama late in that game, right? And Alabama had a chance to go in and score while it was 16-14, fumbles the football and gives it back to South Florida. South Florida had a turnover or two themselves that really aided Alabama. So it wasn't just a bad day. It was, you know, it was an exposure of some of the weaknesses that we've seen over the last couple of years for this Alabama offense. When they had to throw the football, they had a really hard time doing so. And Alabama covers up their mess. They end up cleaning up last night, but something to watch. Alabama lost a lot of players in transfer portal last year, and as far as pass catchers and pass defenders, I've got some questions for this team. Lots of good players everywhere else, but I've got questions in those spots. And now I've got some questions on the offensive line. South Florida was causing issues for this offensive line for Alabama, and I don't understand that at all. We'll talk more about it. We're going to talk Alabama, Wisconsin here shortly. Missouri, we've caught a little bit of flack for Missouri being in our I think they were around the 10 spot last week or 12 or something like that. We've moved them up farther. They haven't beat anybody this year that is worth really mentioning, but we did all the research on this roster in the offseason. We know what this roster is. Yes, they lost a couple of NFL guys on the defense. They sure did. But offensively, they bring a ton back, and they're going to be really good on the offensive side of the ball. If as long as the running backs work out that they brought in on the transfer portal, Missouri's offense is going to be really, really, really good. Miami at number 7. This is the team to beat in the ACC. We watched them go into the swamp, which I don't think Florida's a good football team. So, we're going to take that with a grain of salt a little bit, but they stomped them. They didn't play with their food. They stomped them. And Miami looks like a team, really the only team in the ACC with any kind of killer instinct at all. And Oregon at number 6, this is we've had to move Oregon down. We had them much higher ranked, had to move them down. They've struggled the first 2 weeks with Idaho and Boise State. And we've noticed a couple of common trends in those games. Oregon's offensive line doesn't look very good right now. And I'm not sure what's going on. Oregon fans, I'd love for you to let me know in the comment section. But, and don't tell me about Idaho's defensive line. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. Idaho doesn't have near the defensive line of some of the teams that Oregon's going to play this year. So it's not about Idaho having an amazing defensive line. Boise State is a good team. They beat Boise State by a field goal as time expired last night. But we had considered Oregon a national championship contender, and so far they haven't looked like it. What do you think, Mason?
Yeah, with Oregon, offensive line, got to figure something out at center. I feel like they're struggling to run the ball at times. Really got lucky with a punt return for a touchdown late by Tez Johnson. First punt return for a touchdown since 2018 for Oregon there. That was a pretty lucky play, if you ask me. And also, the weakness, which we didn't expect Oregon's offensive line to struggle like they have, but the weakness in the secondary, particularly in the safety position, is kind of rearing its ugly head. They once again are struggling, or I guess not once again, but as we predicted, they are struggling at the safety position, not just in the passing game, but also in the running game. They were almost refusing to step up and make some key run stops against Boise State. It's a big reason why they struggled on defense was at the safety position. Going to see what they can do moving forward, but I'm concerned about them as they get into Big Ten play, get in against some tougher defenses and some tougher offenses as well. Not looking good for Oregon heading into Week 3. I'm pretty concerned about them as a playoff team, as a national championship hopeful. We'll see, but I think it's fair to move them down for now. Miami looks really good, right? We said it all offseason. We really like what they have on defense. Cam Ward is playing like we thought he would. He looks like a Heisman hopeful. They've got a lot of tough games coming up, but like I said earlier, this is the team that is clearly planted as the tier 1 and the lone leader in the ACC, I think, and moving forward, they are a force to be reckoned with for sure. Missouri got them at 8. They haven't played anybody. They really won't play anybody until Texas A&M, which doesn't even seem like a tough game at this point. But they've got Boston College this week, Could be an interesting game. I don't see Missouri struggling with Boston College. Then they have Vandy at home, should win there. They get a bye week, and then they go to Texas A&M. That'll be an interesting game. But I mean, you look at their schedule; they've got a real opportunity here to end up with 11 or even 12 wins when you look at their schedule. And I know that's crazy to hear, but other than Alabama, I don't know that there's anybody that I'm looking at to really test Missouri this year with how they've looked on offense and defense. Really impressed with the defensive line after they lose a first rounder in Robinson off the defensive line. I think that Missouri's got themselves a pretty good little program going on here. And they will be ones to watch in the SEC and in the college football playoff moving forward. At number 9, we've got Alabama. Struggled, obviously, like you said, against South Florida. Got to go to Camp Randall this weekend and play in a noon kickoff, which I hate. That's kind of the game of the week, but Fox has rights there, so they're going to do their big noon kickoff for that game. Should be an interesting game. We'll break that down here in a minute, but man, then moving on to USC. Mark, I think it's fair to question, is the USC's defense ahead of their offense right now heading into week 3? Who thought we would be saying that? It definitely could be the case. I think D'Anton Lynn has to be, defensive coach of the year at this point. He's on a short list of best coaches on the defensive side of the football. Really turned around this defense for USC. Might be the number 3 team in the Big Ten right now, and maybe even second. With the way Oregon's playing, I think that USC right now could, at least for based off of momentum and all that, they're kind of the team that comes into the Big Ten and looks like the most challenging team for the Big Ten. So I think that the Trojans are kind of on their high horse right now and should be.
Absolutely. Let's get into the top 5 here. Tennessee at number 5. Tennessee slides on up into the top 5, and they deserve to be there. I honestly, you might could swap them and Ole Miss at 4 right this second. Ole Miss hasn't beat anybody, so we're kind of projecting a little bit with Ole Miss. You have to project with some of these teams at this point in the season, guys. I mean, we look at the rosters. Although Ole Miss hasn't played anybody, we can't, put them at 25. We know that they're going to be better than that. So Tennessee, Ole Miss, I feel like they're kind of interchangeable there. Nico looked really, really good. A couple of mistakes, to be expected. But overall, Tennessee's offense and defense looks to be as complementary as I've seen them in years. And we've been on Tennessee for a couple of months now, really ever since we did their deep dive in the off season, and the rest of the national media is about to get on that Tennessee train. I'm just going to let you know right now that Tennessee is going to be a team that's talked about a ton by the national media over the next few weeks, especially as some of these awesome games kick off. They got to play Oklahoma real soon, so we'll be talking about that game. But kudos to Tennessee. This is the best Tennessee team that we've seen in years. We'll see how far they can take it with first-year quarterback Nico Iamaleava. There you go. Ole Miss, as I said, really good team. Don't know much about them. We know that they're going to be really, really good, so we've got them where we've got them. They're undefeated at this point, so no real argument, I wouldn't think, there. Ohio State, we kind of slid down to number 3. Again, we haven't seen Ohio State play anybody. So we're just going to have to kind of wait and see. They don't have the hardest schedule in the world, that's for sure. Going to play Oregon later this season, that game, hopefully Oregon can turn it around. Because as of right now, that game's lost a little bit of luster, but it will still be must-watch television, and we'll know more about Ohio State whenever they go against some of those, upper echelon teams, which they have not done yet. Texas crushes Michigan this week, and they absolutely deserve to be number 1 or number 2 in this ranking. There's no doubt about that. Georgia crushed Clemson week 1. Texas crushes Michigan week 2. You could argue either one of these teams, I feel like, being in that number 1 spot. I feel like Georgia's a more well-rounded football team at this point. Not to say that Texas couldn't beat Georgia, because I don't if Georgia and Texas play 10 times, Georgia's not winning all 10 times. I don't think so. I'm not sitting here saying that Georgia is for sure, head and shoulders above Texas, but you got to look at this group and think, we've only seen two excellent teams so far this year, right? As far as play on the field, maybe three. You can include Tennessee with that possibly. But as far as excellent teams in college football early in the season, I think Georgia and Texas are certainly in that conversation, and you could throw Tennessee in there as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean Georgia still, number one team. There's no surprises there. I think that if we wanted to get cute, we could have put Texas at number one and Georgia at two. I think they're really 1A and 1B based on what we've seen on the field at this point. Texas, their offense is a little bit ahead of Georgia's right now. Georgia's defense is, I think, a little bit further ahead of Texas's defense, which is why they get the nod here at number one. But speaking of Texas, I'm really surprised with what they've been able to do on the defensive line and stopping the run game. Michigan did not run the ball well against Texas. They played pretty good against the run the week before. Let's see if that continues, because I think that's kind of the biggest question mark on the defensive side of the football is that defensive line up front. If they keep playing like they are, they're going to be one of the teams to be reckoned with in the SEC. By the way, we do get a Georgia at Texas matchup later in the year. That one looks ever so enticing after a strong performance by Texas in week 2. Ohio State, look, I mean, based on what we've seen in the Big Ten so far this year, it looks like Ohio State could kind of run the gauntlet and go 12-0. They do have to go to Oregon, but right now, if I'm picking that game, I'm picking Ohio State to beat Oregon based on what we've seen from Oregon so far this year. Anything could happen. If anything, this past week kind of proves that anything can happen in college football. But Ohio State definitely the leader in the Big Ten at this point. Ole Miss, haven't seen them face anyone, but they look really good. Even playing nobody type of games and type of teams. This past week, Jackson Dark was 24. Started the game off 24 of 24, which tied a record. I believe I know it was an Ole Miss record. I think if he had gotten 2 more, it would have tied the record for FBS. 26 straight completions would have gotten there. But really strong performance. He's planted himself in the Heisman conversation, I guess, for Jackson Dart there. Got to see him continue, but it looks like he's just got a plethora of options around him. Also, Harris coming over from Miami, the running back, has 4 touchdowns on the ground. Really strong performance by him. I think that they've got themselves a really good running back in Harris. And then Tennessee, I firmly look. We said it last week that Tennessee could be playing themselves into a top 5 sort of program here. I didn't think it would come this quickly, but after that performance against NC State, and it wasn't just the fact that they beat NC State; it was how they did it. Style points matter in college football. They looked very stylish against NC State. I think we might have had NC State a little bit too high going into the season based on what we've seen on the field, but I thought that Tennessee played really well. Nico looked good, did throw a couple of interceptions, but followed up those interceptions with touchdown drives. I think he showed a lot of poise, and Tennessee is going to be the darling of the media here in the very near future, but they deserve it. They look like a really good team.
Absolutely. If Tennessee fans are going to be going crazy, it's going to be a season of orange. For sure. Let's jump into our college football playoff predictions. Mason, you want to kind of guide us through this? This is your baby right here. So
this is.
I'm gonna let you talk us through this bad boy.
Well, not a whole lot has changed really. We moved Texas in. Here are the newcomers to this prediction. Texas slides in and firmly plants himself at number 5, the first SEC team behind Georgia, and I think that's pretty fair just based on what we know in projecting their schedule moving forward, I think that Georgia's kind of the only team left on the schedule that really poses a threat to Texas. They do have a pretty easy schedule for the rest of the year. So Texas moves up to number 5. 1 through 4 just about stays the same. We do flip Ohio State and Oregon based on what we've seen from Oregon so far. So Ohio State moves into that number 2 slot. I feel pretty confident in 1 through 4 at this point. But moving on to number 6, Tennessee, which I believe we had Tennessee at 6. So no movement there. I think that they're really good. It's going to be tough to kind of compare Tennessee to Texas since they don't face head-to-head this year. I think that both teams could end up being 11-1 and kind of in some sort of SEC tiebreaker for that SEC championship game there. That's going to be really interesting. I mentioned Oregon sliding down to number 7. You got to slide them down, right? And then Ole Miss is another team that could end up with only one SEC loss to a Georgia, and so there could be a weird situation where you've got a tiebreaker between Ole Miss, Texas, and Tennessee, all teams that don't play each other, if I'm not mistaken. And so how does that tiebreaker work out if they all have one SEC loss? All of them coming to Georgia, how do you break that head to head? I haven't heard the official ruling from the SEC on that yet. I'm sure it's out there since the season has started, but I know whenever I first did this prediction in the preseason, there were no tiebreaker rules out yet, so it's kind of tough to rank 5, 6, and 8 there for the SEC. Moving on to number 9, we got to put USC in there. Give them their flowers. I think that they really look like one of the best teams in the Big Ten at this point. We've said here recently that they're probably the 3rd best team in the Big Ten. So until they prove otherwise, I'm going to have them as the 3rd best team in the Big Ten in the college football playoff as well. Really interesting matchup there too between SC and Ole Miss. Of course, Lane Kiffin, coached at USC for a period there. Could he maybe get a chance to kind of get revenge against his old team? That would be an interesting matchup. And then Clemson kind of slides in at number 10. I kind of struggled between Clemson and Louisville, here to kind of find that second ACC team. But I think that Clemson might be a little bit ahead of Louisville right now based on the roster and based on what we've seen. But that'll all play itself out. I'm not concerned about that. And also, I think it's fair to point out that we had Notre Dame in this prediction. Yeah. And the fact that Notre Dame loses to Northern Illinois, that allows a second ACC team or a second Big 12 team to slide in. And right now, I'm giving that to Clemson. That definitely could be changing here in the future. And then Penn State, I don't like what I saw against Bowling Green. I think that the offense looks to be a step ahead of where it was last year. The defense is noticeably a step back from where it was last year. So maybe we got a little bit of a wash for Penn State. They do have a pretty favorable schedule, though. I think that they'll be able to navigate it. No Michigan on the schedule this year for Penn State. We'll have to wait and see, but I think that Penn State could still be a playoff team when it's all said and done. And then at number 12, I kind of talked about it earlier in the show, but Boise State looks like the best kind of at-large team, outside of the Power Four. It's going to be a little bit of a battle, I think, between them and probably Liberty. But right now, based on what we've seen, I think that Boise State just kind of looks like the better team on film.
Yeah. I think so. Liberty was more in there just kind of by the fact of their schedule, who they play, but they may have just, I guess, lost too much off of their roster, lost a really good quarterback off of their roster, which is obviously a big deal. I like all this stuff. I mean, I like every bit of it. Penn State is Penn State, Boise State, certainly the weakest links out of these 12, so I feel like they're in the right spots there, 11 and 12, at least to fit my eye. Clemson kind of following them. The rest of these teams I feel like are, let's see, Clemson, USC, Boise State, Penn State. I don't feel like those 4 teams have a legitimate chance to win a national championship.
Right.
The rest of these teams I feel like have at least a somewhat legitimate chance. Utah is probably not, but love Miami, love Ohio State. Tennessee is certainly a dark horse for the national championship. Yeah, I like all of those, and then Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss. I think those are no brainers. Yeah,
Well,
this
and
looks
I think
and
it's
makes a lot of
also
sense to me.
I think it's also fair to question now, based on what we've seen from Missouri, if if the SEC shouldn't get 5 teams in, based on what we've seen, and maybe a Clemson or a Penn State are kind of those teams that are the first ones looking out, on the outside looking in,
Yeah.
I guess I should say. And because I mean, Missouri's got a really favorable schedule. No Georgia on the schedule. No Texas on the schedule. They do have to face Alabama and Oklahoma, but Texas A&M. I mean, it's a pretty favorable schedule for Missouri, so I definitely kind of want to find some room for them. I'm just not confident in putting 5 SEC teams into the college football playoff right now, knowing what the committee has done in the past. I think that in order for that to happen, the ACC kind of has to cannibalize, and the Big Ten has to cannibalize on themselves. And you're going to have to see Penn State drop a game to a team that they shouldn't. And then same with Clemson or Louisville. We'll kind of have to see how those 2 matchups work out there. But really interesting stuff, and I'm kind of anxious to see what the SEC does, because they're very top heavy this year, and I think that they do have 5 of the top 12 teams when it's all said and done.
Yep, and there you have it, guys. There's our updated top 25 and college football playoff predictions headed into week 3. And since we are headed into week 3, guys, we've got some work to do. And we're going to give you guys just our initial thoughts on some of these big games that are coming up for week 3. We haven't done all our deep dives on all these games and things like that, but we're going to kind of put our feelers out there and talk about some of these games, and we're going to revisit them on the live show Tuesday, where we give our official predictions. We'll have more of the analytics, the graphics, all that good stuff to kind of go by. But this is the show every week where we just we get our head right, formulate a couple of thoughts about these teams, the initial thoughts. These are our gut feelings, and some of these teams I haven't even had a chance to go back and watch some of their games yet from this past week. So that's something that as soon as I get done with the Sunday show, I'm going inside to turn the TV on and watch some of the replays of some of the games I might have missed. But let's start off with Arizona at Kansas State, and you guys let me know in the comment section what you think about these games. I'd love from you, because we don't know yet. Like I said, I'm still trying to make up my mind on some of this stuff. But Kansas State comes off of a 34-27 victory over Tulane, in which they were outgained in the game. Tulane was able to really move the ball around, especially through the air, on this Kansas State defense. And Kansas State figures out a way to get it done. They're kind of towards the end of the game. What are we going to get out of Avery Johnson? This guy, I feel like, is still trying to kind of cut his teeth in this offense a little bit. What do we get out of him long term? What's going on with Dante Cephas, Mason? Is he hurt? Is that do you know?
I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure. That's something we'll have to kind of break down a little bit later on, and have for our Tuesday show. But I'm not sure what's going on with old Cephas.
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't see any statistics for him. Kansas State fans, I know you guys are super in tune with everything. Let us know what's going on with Dante Cephas, because this was a guy that we both talked about. We were like, oh, well, him leaving Penn State really kind of hurts, Penn State. And then where's he at? I guess he's hurt. I don't know. I don't hope that he's hurt, but statistically, I hope that he's just not playing. I hope that he's not playing because of injury and not something else. But you need him. You need a change up on this offense, I feel like, for sure. And defensively, I talked about all the yards given up. It's kind of a head scratcher with all the returning talent that you've got on this defense. I mean, the secondary just got absolutely cooked. So I'm curious as to how you're going to counteract this in such a quick turnaround against Arizona, who only scores 22 points last week, sure, and had a, I mean, I'm talking about just one of the worst first halves you could possibly have. 0 of 10 on third down in the first half for Arizona in this game. That's absolutely ridiculous. I think they finished the game 2 of 12 or something like that. I something or another like that. It was really, really bad after they ended up getting a 22-10 victory over Northern Arizona. So this game starts off. Kansas State is a 7.5-point favorite, is what I got. You got them at 8.5 there. So
yeah.
these lines vary from place to place. I couldn't even find lines on some of the games we're going to talk about yet. So I'm glad that you were able to. But this game is going to be played on Friday night at 8 p.m. There at the Snyder Family Stadium. What do you think about this one, Mason? Kansas State has been a team that, admittedly, you have done more research on and been kind of more attached to as the season has went on. I've been kind of gravitating towards like the Utah side of things in the Big 12, and Kansas State was a team season that you were a little higher on than I was, and I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on Kansas State at this point.
Well, the defense is certainly behind the offense right now. They rank 64th in the country so far in total yards allowed. They've given up 312.5 yards per game so far. That's not great. That's not typical Chris Kleiman defense. So, and they've got their work cut out for them this week. Going up against Arizona, Arizona ranks 4th in total offense at 494 yards, and that's after the game against what was it, Northern Arizona last week. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive. They're averaging 8.8 yards per play, which is first in the country. That's tough to stop, right? And a lot of that is Teteroa McMillan and Noah Fafita, linking up on seemingly their brains are meshed together, and they're just thinking each other's thoughts throughout the game is what it looks like, because you see Noah Fafita scramble out of the pocket and kind of try to figure out something to do, kind of playing backyard football in some cases. And lo and behold, his number one receiver, who's being double teamed, is wide open somehow. Really impressive. Those two players can take over a football game. So I'm really anxious to see kind of what that matchup looks like. Kansas State did lose a lot in their defensive secondary this year due to the transfer portal and graduation and things like that. So that could be an area that Arizona exploits, and they will try to exploit in this game. I'm still a little bit concerned about the coaching for Arizona. I think that when you look at the coaching matchup between Kansas State and Arizona, I think that Kansas State has a clear edge, but we'll see. That, like I said, those two players, if you can limit Noah Fafita, you can limit McMillan, I think you got a really good chance at winning this football game. That's a tough ask, because I do feel like these are two of the better players in college football right now. Moving over to Kansas State's offense, we kind of just don't know what is going to happen with Avery Johnson. He's getting his first year as a starter. He's a true sophomore. Didn't play a ton last year. Tons of upside. Really like what he's got as a skill, as a quarterback, as a talent. I think that he is pretty strong, but I don't know that the training wheels aren't off yet. It feels like they are limited with their pass catching weapons. It looks like Dante Cephas did play in this game. He had one-handed catch that ended up being ruled out of bounds. So he's playing, just hasn't recorded any stats. I kind of wonder if that says more about the scheme right now and also Avery Johnson than it does about Dante Cephas. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have our eyes glued on this one. This is the first game that we'll get a chance to really just watch Kansas State through and through, for a full game. But as of right now, I think it's fair to question the playmakers on the perimeter. They have ran the ball pretty effectively. They're averaging 7.8 yards per rush, which is good for 5th in the country. Again, they're not playing, world beaters on, the defensive side of the football. So we'll take that with a grain of salt, but they're averaging 7.8 yards per rush and 7.5 yards per play, which is 17th in the country. So in total, as a whole, this is a matchup between two great offenses, right? So far, or not great, but two good offenses. They're definitely ahead of the defensive sides of the football. Kansas State's defense is a little bit ahead of Arizona's defense, but how is this all going to play out? I think it's going to be a really close game. I think 8.5 points is way too dang much for this game as of right now. That Kansas State is getting this at home. I think that does help playing in Manhattan, but right now my gut tells me that it's going to be closer than 8.5. And also, I kind of like the over. I wouldn't bet that right now. Let's kind of wait and see how this number moves around a little bit. But by the way, I'm going to go ahead and give you let you know what sportsbook this is coming from. This is coming from FanDuel. I kind of have to hunt around for some odds this early in the week, but as of right now, if you feel good one way or another about this game, you can go to FanDuel and bet it at 8.5 or the over/under at 57.5. I'm gonna wait to make a play later in the week to see kind of what this number does, but I like Arizona to keep it closer than a 2-score game at this point.
As far as the line goes, right now I'm leaning with you for sure. 57.5, so a pretty high number as well. We'll kind of have to look at that. Yeah, this is our first chance to really get a look at these teams, in a pivotal matchup that everybody's going to be watching. Arizona returns a lot of guys on the offensive line. They return 4 out of 5 starters on the offensive line, and then you've got Kansas State that returns, 3 guys on that defensive line, and then a couple of starting linebackers as well. So I think you're going to get to kind of see strength on strength there, right? And not a ton of returning guys on the offensive line for Kansas State. So still trying to kind of get your feet set. And on the other side of that, Arizona's got all transfer players on the defensive line. So I feel like you've kind of got like strength on strength, and then weakness on weakness, kind of on these. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that dynamic works out as the week goes on. But yeah, I mean, Arizona is an offensive-led football team. There's zero doubt about that right now. And we just watched Kansas State struggle defensively last week, and it shouldn't be that way. I mean, Kansas State was a team that you had way less questions going into the season about the defense than you did the offense. You had way more returning starters on defense. So kind of puzzling to me a little bit. We'll have to see. Offensively, love the way they've been running the football. Good things happen to offenses that run the football. DJ Giddens, Dylan Edwards, I like that duo there in the backfield. Dylan Edwards, boy, sure didn't make a good decision getting out of Colorado. But we got to see some more playmakers get involved, and that means that Avery Johnson has got to figure out a way to get him the football at the right time, and we'll see. They're going to have a chance against this Arizona defense to be able to do some good things offensively for sure. All right, let's talk about our next one. Hope you guys are doing good. Thank you all so much for watching today. Happy to be out here on a Sunday talking some college football. We're already on to week 3. Really, really awesome stuff. Where are we going? We're going LSU at South Carolina. Let me get my notes pulled up here, at least some of them. You guys drop us a comment in the comment section. Let us know what it is, if there's a game that you want to talk about. It's not the most impressive slate of college football ever this week, right? But still some really, really good matchups that are going to be interesting to watch, no doubt about it. All right. Almost there. Ta-da. LSU at South Carolina. This one is going to be at noon there in Williams-Brice Stadium. LSU is opening up as an 8.5-point favorite in this one. We just came off of a game where we saw South Carolina's defensive line just absolutely dominate Kentucky. And Kentucky traditionally has been a team where we say, well, they may not be that great, but they're going to be good on the lines of scrimmage. Well, I don't know if that was true. necessarily. Kentucky's kind of struggled the last couple of years on the line of scrimmage, and South Carolina just exposed them completely. Um, this kind of came out of nowhere for me, Mason. I mean, I knew that South Carolina had a somewhat decent defense, but I just thought that their offense was going to leave them out to dry so much that I didn't think that it would really matter a whole lot. But true freshman Dylan Stewart has really just kind of taken what I thought was a decent defensive line, and he's made it to where it's a defensive line that we're going to have to talk about. And we're going to have to give them their flowers, as you like to say, because they dominated this football game. A dominant defensive line can totally change a football game. And with this matchup between South Carolina and LSU, you're going to have the best unit on offense, in my opinion, in LSU's offensive line versus South Carolina's best unit on their team in their defensive line. So it's going to be, strength on strength here. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? That's what we've got going on. And I won't necessarily say immovable object, but you get the point. This one's hard for me to figure out. I mean, it really is. Lenora Sellers has been really inconsistent, and I think most people would say, yeah, well, he doesn't have any experience, and that is a very good point. This guy's going to be inconsistent from week to week, and he's about to go against what I think is one of the worst defenses in the SEC. And we saw Lenora Sellers be able to kind of figure some things out as that game went on against Kentucky. Now, they had every opportunity to do so because their defense was handing them the football a lot. What's kind of your early thoughts on this one, Mason? We know that, like I said, LSU offensive line against that South Carolina defensive line, I think is going to be kind of the title of this game, at least as far as the predictions go early on. What are your initial thoughts on this one?
Well, I think that you nailed it. The talking point all week about this game is going to be the LSU offensive line versus the South Carolina defensive line. South Carolina is surging on their defensive line and is one of the bigger sort of I guess one of the most surprising things coming out of the SEC in general, let alone South Carolina. I think that their ends are playing really, really well. They lose Xavier McLeod out of the middle of their defensive line, and it doesn't seem to matter because the ends are so disruptive, and they're also run containing pretty well. This defense right now ranks 12th in the country, giving up just 3.6 yards per play as a whole. And when you look at the matchup, South Carolina's defense is actually ahead of LSU's offense right now. In most major categories, they're ahead in yards per game. They've only given up 244 yards per game. LSU is, which puts them at 26 in the country on defense. LSU is 55th in the country on offense in total yards. I mentioned the yards per play. They're 12th in the country. Rushing yards, they've given up 123 total and 3.1 yards per attempt. It's not bad, but could be better, I think. And then the passing yards, they've only given up 120 yards passing. I think that's the most surprising element to this South Carolina defense is the passing yards. Only giving up 120 yards per game, and that's good for 15th in the country. So really impressive there. 4.4 yards per attempt in the passing game. That's 10th in the country. I mean, their defense is looking like a top 25 defense, and I don't think anybody had that on their bingo card heading into the season for South Carolina. But Dylan Stewart, the young freshman, is electric. He is really fun to watch. If you haven't had a chance to watch him play yet, I highly recommend keeping an eye on number 6 because he's all over the field. He's a freaking ball hawk, and I think South Carolina got themselves a good one. High motor guy. And then the offensive side of the football for LSU, really looking at that offensive line to make a push up front. This is where we'll kind of know if South Carolina's defense is fool's gold or if they're the real deal. Because they're going to have their tests, they're going to have their work cut out for them, and they're going to be tested by LSU and in particular this offensive line. But LSU's offense as a whole is pretty dang good, and I think that there's going to be a little bit of drop off from last season based on what we've seen so far. But I think that Garrett Nussmeier is fully competent. I like the weapons on the outside. We'll have to see if Chris Hilton comes back for this game or not. He is definitely a piece that they are missing on the perimeter. But I like what LSU does. And in this matchup, in this game, we're getting good on good and bad on bad once again with LSU's offense versus South Carolina's defense. I think that's going to be the must-watch, must-see TV sort of matchup there. But then you move over to the other side of the football, and you see that LSU's defense is ahead of South Carolina's offense, right? So kind of an even matchup when you really look at it. But LSU's defense is giving up 371 yards per game, which is not great. That's 109th in the country. But South Carolina's offense is only averaging 270 yards per game. So who's really winning there? It still seems like LSU's got the edge overall. And, in particular in the run game, which I don't think many people expected with what LSU lost off the defensive line. But they're only giving up 109.5 yards per game on the ground. That's good for 22nd in the country. And they're giving up 3.6 yards per carry. Those aren't great numbers. I'm not telling you that the LSU defense has arrived or anything like that. But this is much improved from where they were last season. And I expect LSU and Blake Baker to continue to build on this success as the season goes on. This could be kind of what decides the game in a way, this matchup, LSU's defense versus South Carolina's offense. I think I've got to give LSU the slight edge on this side of the football this week. Do they show up on the road in Columbia? It's going to be a hostile environment. I don't know if the time has been announced yet for this game. I don't see a time anywhere yet, but
noon.
Actually, it is a noon. It's a noon kickoff, which that really stinks for South Carolina. You'd like to have this game at night, but nonetheless, I feel like the South Carolina fans are going to show up. They always do, no matter what this team does. Yeah. This is a really good fan base. They show up for their team, and LSU is going to be walking into the Lions' Den. I think there's a lot of hype behind South Carolina after a huge win against Kentucky. And I kind of like South Carolina to keep it close. If this game is going to be a blowout, LSU is going to win in blowout fashion, right? If it's a blowout. But I kind of like, at least early in the week, I kind of like South Carolina to keep it close, within a touchdown. And a couple things could go their way. Nussmeier could get sacked by Dylan Stewart, and, a scoop and score could kind of turn this game into South Carolina's favor. I'm really excited for this matchup. And we weren't going to talk about this game before this week was played. This wasn't on our slate to talk about. This wasn't a matchup of the week. And now, based on what South Carolina has done and showed us on their defense, on the defensive side of the football in particular against Kentucky, kind of slides them into, one of the key matchups this week. College game day is going to be there. This is a big matchup now, and I'm excited for it. I'm all for it because we didn't have South Carolina picked to talk about at all this season, and now they are looking like a pretty good little team here that might upset some people as the season goes on. I'm nicknaming them Scarolina because I think that they're a pretty scary team now, in particular on defense.
Yeah, here's something that's really, really interesting to me, and I might be the only person that feels this way. I don't know, and I don't necessarily feel this way. I just kind of have a hunch. I don't think this offensive line for LSU is as good as they're advertised, and we're going to really find out this weekend. And the reason I say that, guys, is I know they've got the names there. I love Emory Jones, Miles Frazier, Will Campbell, all that. I get it. I like Mason Taylor to help out there as well at tight end. But these guys are a bunch of returning guys, and we got all these notions built up in our heads about this offensive line last year whenever you had a Heisman caliber quarterback that could escape the pocket at any moment. That's not this offense this year for LSU. This is a pocket passer that they have in Garrett Nussmeier. He's not running out of the pocket. He's not a run threat. And with that being said, who is the run threat on this team at this point? Running back is very much depleted, not deep at all. LSU has got to figure out a way to run the football in this football game. And we just saw Kentucky, they couldn't figure out a way to do it. They just, I mean, every once in a while they'd hit a run, but it amounted to nothing. And so I'm really interested to see how this LSU offensive line protects Nussmeier and forms a pocket for him with these pass rushers. That is going to be a big part of this game because LSU, I'm interested to see what their game plan is now. Now that you know that you're really hurting in the running back room, you really need all your wide receivers back for this one. South Carolina returns some guys in that secondary. You know, I feel like that's obviously a matchup. LSU has thrown the ball all around the yard over the last couple of years. But you bring back some starters for South Carolina, Kilgore, Eamon Smith. So all these guys are returning, Fortune. All these guys are returning starters from last year in that secondary. So we didn't see Kentucky get a chance to test the secondary at all because this pass rush was just all over them. LSU's going to do better at protecting their quarterback than what Kentucky did for Brock Vandagriff, but I don't think it's just a foregone conclusion that LSU's going to be able to form a nice little pocket and be able to pass the ball around in this game. I'm not sold on that at all. Right now, I like South Carolina plus 8.5 is where I'm at. But guys, this is our initial thoughts. I still got some digging to do on these two teams and some film to watch for sure. But as of right now, I like South Carolina to keep this around a touchdown. What do you think?
I'm with you. I could see LSU kind of running away with it, like I said, but I'm gonna at least at this point, early Sunday afternoon, I'm picking South Carolina to cover, and I think that the under probably has a better shot at hitting, but we'll see. I'm still early in my thought process there on this game. Tuesday night, we'll be breaking this thing down officially. We'll have all of our notes in front of us, and we'll be ready to go on Tuesday night. But appreciate everybody watching this breakdown. Wanted to give you something early in the week to give you something to chew on, get to kind of whet your appetite for our Tuesday night show. We'll have a full preview for you on Tuesday night. We welcome y'all to come in live and check that out.
7:30 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it, guys. It is preview and prediction time. All right, let's go over to Alabama at Wisconsin. Whoa! Wisconsin, 15.5 points. If that line stays up, I can go ahead and tell you right now, I'll just bet plus the points because that's a ton of points here in this football game.
Well, that's at FanDuel. That's at FanDuel. So if you want to bet it now. I some other books have kind of opened up at like 9.5 points. So I think that's a really good number to bet on if you can on FanDuel today. Like go ahead and do that. That's your that's not betting advice, but that's kind of what I would play. Give you guys a little bit of something to think about there because that number will move for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, it will. All right, so we watched Alabama really struggle this past week with South Florida, and it had a lot to do with South Florida being able to ideologically kind of put Alabama, paint them in a corner a little bit. Like, okay, we're going to take away the run game. Alabama was not able to run, at least early in the game, was not able to run the football. And when you take the run away from Alabama, you really cause a conundrum on their offense because this isn't a team that's just going to throw their way to victory, okay? On the other hand of this, you've got Wisconsin, who brings in Mr. Van Dymes himself, right? And Wisconsin was one of the first games I watched this year. Their game, that first game of the year was one of the first ones I watched. And going into that game, I felt really good about Wisconsin and bringing in Tyler Van Dyke and some of the other options that they brought in through the transfer portal or recruiting. And then I watched the game, and I remembered why Tyler Van Dyke, I felt, had mixed feelings about him the year before. He's very inconsistent. But this air raid system that Phil Longo runs at Wisconsin, if ran correctly, could cause some pretty serious problems for an Alabama defense that I feel like their secondary is their weakness this year, especially after losing Caleb Downs. Lots of young guys in that secondary. Linebacker core for Alabama is top 5 in the country. I don't think there's really any doubt about that. And the defensive line, I would say, is pretty mid as far as Alabama's standards are concerned. A couple of nice pieces there, but not something that is just like overwhelming in this football game. What are your thoughts, man? I like the schemes that Wisconsin is going to bring into this football game against this Alabama defense, but I'm not so sure they can execute. What are your thoughts on this one?
Man, I really am kind of puzzled as far as how this game is going to go. I thought I had a pretty good idea of what Alabama was going to be, and then they go out and just lay a big old stinking egg against South Florida. Look ahead game. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you kind of make of that and how you sort of factor that into your rankings here and all that when you look at what Alabama is moving forward. I'm concerned about this Alabama offense, and particularly on the offensive line. They struggled to block South Florida. Does Wisconsin's defense, I mean, are they going to be able to exploit a poor rushing offense, for Alabama? I mean, I don't know that they really can. They're ranked 60th in the country right now in rushing yards allowed at 121.5 yards per game. They're giving up 4 yards per rush. That's 70th in the country. And they really haven't played anyone yet. So what are they going to do against Alabama? I'm not sure that this is necessarily the matchup that if you're looking to beat Alabama, I don't know if this is the matchup you look to exploit. I'm with you. I think that Tyler Van Dyke is going to have to go over the top if you want to beat Alabama. Challenge these young DBs that they're talented, but they're young. Can they go over the top with Tyler Van Dyke? I mean, if he has one of his best games, I think Wisconsin absolutely can win this game. But we've seen the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of Tyler Van Dyke's game throughout the years, and he's kind of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I don't know what we're gonna get out of him, and that to me is kind of what is going to decide this game. I haven't gone back and watched Wisconsin play, game or play by play or anything like that. This will be kind of my first game watching them throughout the entirety of the game. But you look at what Alabama did against South Florida, and your immediate thought is, dang, they're going to struggle this year. However, we saw them face South Florida last year in a similar fashion and squeak by with a win, and they ended up going to the playoffs. So I'm also not going to take too much out of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that there could be a case where Alabama kind of out physicals Wisconsin in this game and wins it in the third and fourth quarter. I would not be betting on Alabama to cover 15.5. If you like Alabama in this game, maybe you wait for that number to drop to where you can get it at 9 or something like that. But to me, that's kind of my play of the week. I know this is a short preview. I don't have a ton of data right now, but Tuesday night, if you guys come back and watch our show on Tuesday night, we'll go through our full preview of this matchup between Alabama and Wisconsin. But as of right now, from a betting perspective, I'm waiting on this number to drop, and I'm gonna bet Alabama, by 2 touchdowns or 2 scores, I should say. I think it could be like a 10 or 14 point win for Alabama this week.
Well, before we get off the subject, if Wisconsin can figure out a way to run the football a little bit. That's going to alleviate a lot of things. Now, that's much easier said than done on this Alabama defense that I feel like is going to be pretty decent against the rush, but we just saw South Florida run the ball on them. So Wisconsin's got to incorporate a little bit more rush game into their game. But let's kind of talk more about the Alabama side of it for just a second. Caden Proctor sat on the sidelines this past weekend, didn't play, and it caused this offensive line to be completely jumbled up. And it really just kind of ruined everything for a large portion in this game. I forget who it was. It was number 75, I think, was playing right guard. He had 4 holding penalties in this game for Alabama, and he got to a point where Coach DeBoer on the sideline was like, just like, oh, like, are you kidding me? Kind of hard to watch. What a choppy game it was. Very undisciplined, very unorganized, it seemed like, for Alabama in that football game. And I'm going to let all y'all know I watched a bunch of football this past weekend, Alabama included in this. If your tackles don't line up on the line of scrimmage this year, you're getting called for illegal formation. I don't know if everybody's noticed that or not, but we got to where in football we were trying to back these tackles off the line a little bit and give them a second to react to these ends, and the refs ain't having it. And I think it's going to end up helping the defensive lines out just a little bit. But that's kind of neither here nor there. Alabama has got to figure out a way to run the football in this game. Wisconsin gave up 125 yards rushing to South Dakota this past weekend. Won 27-13 over South Dakota. Not a good football team. Not South Dakota State, just straight up old South Dakota, right? I believe that Wisconsin's strength in their defense kind of lies in that secondary. They got some unbelievable playmakers in that secondary. I'm still waiting on that defensive line to step it up. And this is going to be their opportunity to do it, because at the end of that South Florida game, Alabama ran the football like it was nobody's business. That's how they won this football game and covered up their tracks and made this game look like it wasn't close. Getting Jam Miller going, getting Sanders going, not Sanders, Haynes, Justice Haynes. Getting those guys going was really what ended up helping Alabama pull away from this. And we talked about last week, Alabama, it doesn't seem like Kalen DeBoer is going to try to make Alabama something that they're not. And if that's going to be the case, then they're going to need to get Caden Proctor back healthy. We'll talk about that more this week. We'll check on his status. I'm not sure what that status is. But if he's not back, it really starts to throw a wrench in things for Alabama and the primary thing that they want to do on offense. So I got to do some more research myself on this one, see some of the injury reports. But we got to watch some line movement. But I believe that this game, as of right now, I feel like the line should be 10. If I was to make my own line, I feel like Alabama would be favored by 10 in this one. And that's a fun little game that I like to play on Saturday nights as well. Anything else on this one, Mason?
Nope. We'll like I said, we'll look at it later on. On Tuesday. You can bet this at Caesars at 9 points right now. So just so y'all know, BetMGM has it at 9.5, and DraftKings has it at 16.5. So this number is all over the place. I mean, we're talking about a touchdown discrepancy here. It's just kind of a weird one to open up with, but let's see where it's at Tuesday night and make some predictions then.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump in to our last game here, Mason, that we're going to talk about on the initial thoughts portion of our college football week here on the First and Long College Football Show. Notre Dame at Purdue. Purdue is being given 10.5 points in this one. Notre Dame coming off of a absolutely embarrassing loss, just totally crap down their leg against NIU. Over-under set at 45.5. Vegas is certainly adjusting to what we've all come to realize is a really bad offense for Notre Dame. And where are the wide receivers? It's supposed to be we talked about this on last night's show. It's either where are the wide receivers or why can Riley not throw the ball down the field, right? It's one of the two. I don't know which one it is, are the wide receivers open and he's not hitting them, or are they just not getting open and not giving them any options, and it's basically like a covered sack? I'm not completely sure at this point, but Purdue is a team that made a lot of improvements in the offseason, and this is a game that you and I have circled since the offseason, saying, if Purdue can somehow figure out a way, they host Notre Dame, if they can somehow figure a way to get an upset, that would totally just send Purdue into, I believe, a bowl position and possibly, a little bit better than that, maybe even 7 wins this year, which would be much invited after a really, really tough year. And Ryan Walters is trying to get his feet settled there at Purdue. What do you think about this one, Mason? Notre Dame defensively is really, really good, but offensively has struggled. Do you think Purdue is going to be able to figure out a way to keep those struggles continuing for the Notre Dame offense in this one?
I'm not as sure of what Purdue is going to do defensively. Look, Purdue's played one game so far. It was against Indiana State. They had a bye this past week, which is a weird week 2 bye. But it should help them against Notre Dame. To kind of get ready and spend 2 weeks preparing for what could be the game of these guys' life. To play against Notre Dame and potentially beat Notre Dame. I do think that is well within reason here. But you look at what they did against Indiana State, and I get it, it's Indiana State, but you did what you were supposed to do. 583 total yards. Hudson Card was 24 of 25 with 273 yards and 4 touchdowns. Extremely efficient from him. It doesn't matter who you're playing. When you're 24 or 25, that shows a lot of accuracy and a lot of poise. I think he's playing really well within the system so far in his second season. Really excited to see what this offense does. But, rushing the football, Maccabee had 11 attempts for 89 yards. Jackson, 3 attempts, 83 yards with a 69-yard long run. And then Love had 7 attempts for 38 yards. So kind of got the ground game working there a little bit. Ended up with 248 yards rushing in that game. And then I think that we're still trying to figure some things out in the receiving room. You look at what they did there. Claire had 5 receptions for 71 yards and a touchdown, including a 43-yard touchdown for him. The Georgia transfer, Denylin Morset, only 2 receptions, 27 yards, did get a touchdown as well. No C.J. Smith in this as a pass catcher, which is a little bit concerning. We kind of expected him to be the go-to guy for Purdue. Not really sure what happened there. I'm not going to go back and
Purdue
watch.
fans, let us know what happened there. I'd like to know what's up with C.J. Smith as we kind of get into this week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go back and watch the Indiana State versus Purdue game. Like, I don't even know if I could find that anywhere.
Ain't nobody got no time for that.
No. But I do think it's important to point out, I think the main stat for me is Hudson Card and his efficiency at 24 of 25. That's just really efficient. And I think that, going against Notre Dame, it's going to be different. This Notre Dame defense is still pretty for real, even though, they did lose. It wasn't the defense's fault. Can Purdue's defense, and they've had some transfer portal additions as well, held Indiana State to 154 total yards. It's pretty good. But we're going to have to find out what Purdue can do defensively in this game. I think that it's a good matchup for them. I think that Notre Dame is trending downward right now at on the offensive side of the football. They're going to come out here and they're going to try to just run, right? I would not be surprised if Notre Dame comes out here and passes the ball 15 times against Purdue. Like, I think that they may have to. They may just have to try to run the football because I don't know that they can pass with Riley Leonard. Not effectively, not with his pass-catching weapons and not with his inability to throw the football. It's just not a good recipe for success. Notre Dame has to really do some soul-searching this week, change some things up on offense, because if they go out and they go to Purdue and lose against Purdue, Marcus Freeman's on a short list of the hottest of seats in college football. You can't lose to Northern Illinois and then follow up with a loss to Purdue, even though we think Purdue's a pretty good football team. I think I kind of want to pick Purdue in the money line this early, but for the national media and for college football fans, across the country who aren't paying attention to Purdue, this is a game that Notre Dame should win pretty easily. I think that we're talking about it for a reason, y'all. Purdue might just kind of have a little bit of a coming out party this week against Notre Dame. I think it'll be competitive regardless, but I'm leaning towards Purdue in 10.5. I think it's going to be a close matchup, and I think that this is one that Purdue could win outright against a Notre Dame team that is trending downward. And what does that say about Texas A&M? Well, I mean, that's a little bit of a tangent, but with the way that they played in week one, I don't know that Texas A&M really stands a chance in the SEC now. But yeah, Notre Dame definitely trending downward. They're looking to get right against Purdue. I don't feel very good for them and their hopes this week.
I love the Notre Dame secondary. We've talked about it. Xavier Watts, Morrison over there at corner. We really like the secondary, but who have they played? They haven't played anybody with a pulse. And I'm not saying that Purdue's going to be able to just light it up down the field or anything. I'm not necessarily saying that, but it'll be interesting to see. I mean, Purdue does have a bunch of returners on the offensive line. That's going to help. That's going to help a lot in this football game. Can you get Devin Maccabee going? Maybe Reggie Love, get him going, the transfer that came in this offseason. Got to figure out a way to be balanced on offense and figure out a way to be productive against this really, really, really good Notre Dame defense. But defensively for Purdue, I feel like this Purdue defense stands up pretty good. Most of your weaknesses, I feel like, or I won't say weaknesses. Most of your unknowns at this point are in the secondary. You've got tons of returning guys at defensive tackle, at Jeffrey Imba, Cole Bravard there at nose tackle. These are returning talent guys. You bring over C.J. Madden, transfers in at the Fox position. We'll kind of see how he works out. But returning starters, Kydron Jenkins, Yanni Karloftis. These are guys. These are the strengths of your defense. These are the things that you already know about your defense, and they're all right there in the front seven. So we've talked about Notre Dame and their lack of ability to stretch the field, and that might just play right into Purdue's strength on their defense. I wouldn't call this a super strong Purdue defense, but if there is a strength, it's the front seven. The secondary is the one that's the question. So we'll kind of see. I feel like it's kind of strength on strength in that regard. So, and Notre Dame is they're just not very good on offense right now, guys. Running the football, right, Mason? They've ran the football effectively at times. Riley Leonard, I've seen Riley Leonard play a couple of games, and every game I see him go apologize to his coach at the end of the game. I've seen it twice now. Sorry about that. That's on me, And at some point, it's got to just be like, all right, well, maybe we got the wrong guy here at quarterback. We'll see. I love Riley Leonard and his upside and his playmaking ability, with his feet. But my God, he hasn't been able to hit the broadside of a barn this year. So we're just going to kind of have to wait and see on that. But as of right now, I'm picking Purdue plus 10.5, and money line is certainly a possibility for me as the week goes on, as I figure out kind of more about some injuries and things like that. Riley Leonard was slammed on the ground real hard in his game this past weekend, and their loss to NIU. So I'm interested to see what his status is. I don't think it was his throwing shoulder, but for a guy that can't throw anyway, he's going to need that shoulder to try to run people over, I guess.
He might need both shoulders in this game.
Yeah, I think he's going to need both of them. Anything else on Notre Dame at Purdue? I like Purdue hosting Notre Dame here. I like a possible upset, and I feel like Notre Dame could possibly be in free fall after what was an extremely embarrassing loss last week.
Yeah, well, I was super interested after mentioning C.J. Smith not recording a single catch in his first game, and it looks like he was out with an injury. C.J. Smith was out. Nyland Green, the defensive back transfer from Georgia, was out. They were also without Cam Brown, one of their stud wide receivers, and an offensive lineman in Corey Stewart. All 4 starters, all 4 not playing in week 1. We'll have to wait and see. Ryan Walters has not given an update yet as far as whether or not they will play. We may not know until game time, but we'll keep our eye on that and hopefully have an update Tuesday night for our full preview.
Yeah, we will certainly dig into that, guys. No doubt about it. Again, Tuesday night, 7:30. We're doing that Tuesday night. We're doing our betting show on Thursdays where we give you our best bets of the week. That's a really fun one. We do our reaction show on Saturday nights, and we give you our early thoughts on Sunday morning as it's Sunday morning coming down. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure that you're subscribed so that you're going to see whenever we go live. It's football season, baby. We're going to be going live every time you turn around. We've got your college football content. We want to hear from you in the comment section as well, guys. And we typically put a link in the description of all these videos, all these live shows that we do. You can click on that bad boy and you come on the show. You tell us what you know and tell us why we're wrong. We'd love to hear from you. But until next time, until Tuesday, where we have our preview and prediction live show, we're going to call it here at the First and Long College Football Show. I'm Marcus, that's Mason, and we'll see you Tuesday night.